Paul is the development director for EA Sports at their Burnaby campus in British Columbia, where he established and now runs the Advanced Usability Lab. With over 13 years' experience in software industry, he joined Electronic Arts Canada in 2007 and has successfully contributed on over 10 different titles across multiple platforms, including the popular FIFA, NHL, and NBA franchise. The department he currently leads initiates research and development projects within EA Sports, bringing advanced usability techniques and methodologies to game teams while developing ROI analysis for the company. Veronica is a game user researcher at Electronic Arts as well. Her background is rooted in psychology, HCI, and game studies. That ideally positions her to understand the game user experience. She holds a Master's of Science and is pursuing a PhD at Simon Fraser University. Veronica has written numerous scientific articles on game research, including user experience, gamers' demographics, usability, and believable characters. She has presented at international conferences in North and South America, Europe, and Asia, including venues like GDC, CHI, DIGRA, and Cyber Games. So welcome to Paul and Veronica.
Thanks. Thanks for the great introduction. Thanks for the great speak this morning. That was very educational. Quick overview. That was already done for us, actually. I thought we were going to have to do that. But yeah, we run the Advanced Usability Lab for EA Sports up at the Burnaby campus, which is basically an R&D arm of the game usability research team. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But why we're here is when we were thinking about putting together a presentation, we thought it would be an interesting discussion to talk about the actual research and development in game usability research. So I'm actually somewhat new to the field. My background actually is formally in QA, and we'll talk about how the progression was made from QA to game usability research later in the presentation. But I think we use the word research quite a bit, especially actually in the title of what we do, game usability research. So we want to spend a little bit of time defining, are we really doing research and development? Should we be doing research and development? What are the differences between the two terms, research, and how that sort of comes together? And something to think about if you do have a GUR team within your corporation or within your studio now. Do you want to start thinking about doing actual research in the field of game usability research, or are you just going to do testing in it? So we're going to, we're going to tag team back and forth periodically through the presentation. So Veronica's going to pick up some of the more technical stuff, and I'll come back and talk about how this more applies to what we went through at EA Sports and what you might take some learnings from for your own company. So let me see where we are already. Without further ado, the agenda is, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about research. We're going to talk about scenarios at different companies that you might be experiencing now. We would like to talk about the key indicators that tell you that maybe you should be investing more in some of the research activities opposed to just the service side of GUR. Then we're going to try to apply that to the real-world life of what we went through at EA Sports. So we've only just created the Advanced Usability Lab within the last couple months, but it's been a process that we've been going through for the past 2 years. Hopefully some learnings will come out of that, how to do the proposal for your stakeholders, how to get corporate buy-in to investing in an R&D group, and then ultimately just some final observations that might help you along the way. So to start off with, I'm going to pass it off to Veronica, who's going to talk more about the research aspect of research.
Hello. So yeah, our talk is about doing research and development for game user research. And as you notice, I almost say the word research almost twice in a row. So that's what we want to distinguish, because as the previous talk was saying, okay, we use research methods, but it's popping up a lot on our current practice that we would like to separate those two and to invest a little bit more time into distinguishing what are the connotations or what are they bringing on. So if you were in this room in the previous talk, just touching lightly, game user research is a really young discipline. It's a term coined in the last 2 years, and it's still defining, and there are some earlier definitions about it. But the key point is that it's focused on the activities of doing game usability, user experience, and addressing what's going on between the user and the game. And you'll do those activities such as playtesting, if you will know that with other kind of terms, or doing game usability, or doing user experience evaluation. So those are things that you might have heard before, and yes, those are also doing game user research. So if someone is new to the field, it's not something daunting, but it's a way to start defining what the practice is. So under this umbrella, you have the different assessment activities. And what's different from what we consider as research and development is that that is going to be a departmental mandate. It's more about focusing on expanding that toolbox of techniques that you employ for doing the GUR activity. So in other industries, you might say, okay, doing R&D is developing the new vaccine, or R&D is developing the new fastest CPU. What we think that R&D in the game industry would be to focus on creating in a systematical way new knowledge for your company, to investigate newer ways that you can collect data. So it's actually going to increase the know-how of where you are. Does that make sense? Because you're looking at me and I need a little nod or like no. Okay. So the research here is going to be slightly different from the research here, but it's the same word, and both of them are doing research. It's just where you are stressing on. So based on this distinction, we prepare like four case scenarios as we see how GUR and R&D interact. And please don't take anything like this that is written in stone. It's a way to understand what we do and how we can improve it. So we are going to use these four case scenarios throughout the talk to help us explain what are we doing. And the first case, we name it like, it's case 0, because there is 0 GUR, in the sense that there is no formal activity of doing game user research. Maybe in that company there is no established group to perform this in a systematical way, so maybe the person doesn't have training. Might be the case in a small company where there is no playtesting person, and they ask to a friend, could be close to the demographics to play it and say how the game is doing, and you get some kind of feedback, but there is actually no structured GUR activity. Then in the case 1, there is a dedicated team of people doing GUR, but let's say that their toolbox is very limited, that there are few techniques, and they know those and they stick to them. So they are not looking into incorporate new things, and we will say that they are not trying to practice R&D. In case 2, we will say that there is a single team doing GUR, but in that team that is providing the daily service of playtesting activity and so on, there is at least one person who is going to be dedicated to look into these new techniques or do tweaks to collect information in new modes. And that person is going to be implicitly doing research and development. And I mean implicit because it's part of that group, but it's not like the super mandate. But R&D is happening into that. And in the case number 3, there is GUR activity going on in that company, and there are 2 separated groups. One of them is going to be fully dedicated to do the service part, and the other group is going to be dedicated to do the R&D. And that's why we made it explicit, because one of those groups is going to actually take the flag of, I have to investigate and come up with new ways to start collecting data for my teams, for my users. So, and this is, case scenarios, and you might find yourself in one of those, and of course there will be gray areas behind it and switching between those. But let's go a little bit more with that, and we come up thinking, okay, how GUR is doing and what benefits and risks could come up with performing these type of scenarios. So if scenario 0 and there is no GUR, well, yes, there might be problems such as not having formal feedback, or if you're coming up with some resources, such as pulling information, might not come out in proper timing, will be slow, because maybe a person who is not dedicated to that is going to take the activity of doing usability, and is going to be maybe problem with miscommunication, which was the person actually taking for this project, trying to do usability, juggling with other activities because it's not a priority for that person, and because budget is going to be circumscribed in the sense that maybe they know that they want to collect information somehow, but it's not allocated properly, and might be the risk of having insufficient information, or that information is actually not fully addressing the question that they had. However, if you pay attention to those limits in the budget and try to understand that you have limits for that fringe activity that is going on, trying to prioritize and establish clear limits, and if you focus those little resources that they have, okay, maybe you have a more polished information just by putting clear boundaries and how much you can do for that. With case 1, the risks that we see on that is those few techniques will have a limited breadth on the kind of feedback that you can collect, because there is no single technique that will be the magical source of information. Every single technique is going to talk about a certain layer or a certain aspect of the user. So your feedback is always to be a piece of that reality that technique can answer a question. So the lesser techniques you have, the more constraint is going to be that type of feedback. However, we see that as a benefit, even though you have fewer techniques, that team, because that's over and over again just a handful of techniques, they will become pretty good at that in a faster time. So they will be mastering those techniques, and they will be way efficient in performing those. In the case 2, it's exactly the other way around, because they are looking into expanding their practice, into looking at new ways of collecting information. That toolbox is going to increase, and you will have a more variety of what aspects you want to know about the users, about the game. So it will be possible to have a wider spectrum and satisfy different needs according to what you want to know. And because the person looking forward to these new aspects of GUR is embedded within the rest of the team doing the service, there's a really high synergy of what are the key priorities, what is a technique that is not giving enough, and how can be twisted, or how the methodology can be changed in order to collect a new information. And they're going to be a really sense of teamwork and working together. However, there it is. That person doing R&D, if the time is allocated to that, when it's time to do mass hours of play testing, that person can be sucked from the activity of doing R&D and put into helping the rest of the team providing the service. So we'll be distracting from those activities. that's why, in the case 3, because you have those two GUR aspects going on into two separate groups, we think that one of the risks would be that high synergy that you have with those two teams might be at risk if you don't pay attention and nurture that relationship. And one risk of having your separate department might be that the company has to have a strong R&D support philosophy, in the sense that if it's only an advocator of a single person who is actually saying, yeah, R&D would be a great activity, it's a great endeavor to put in, if that person goes away, support for doing the R&D will go away with that person. So it somehow has to be shown, or the company has to be, the R&D endeavor has to become part of the culture of the company to try to subsidize that risk. And the benefit, as the same thing in case 2, have a wider tool of methods to gather information with. And the extra benefits would be that you have this dedicated team with their own resources and space, so they can be fully dedicated into that to spend all their time in improving and expanding this knowledge for research. So now we have those scenarios. Look at the pros and cons that might come up with those. What are the indicators that, if you're not currently dedicating part of your team or have a team to keep looking and expanding into newer techniques, what might be happening around you that is crying for doing R&D? So one of the things is that the developer teams might have questions that the current techniques cannot answer because of their scope, because they are only collecting information at a certain level. So they are requiring another type of feedback to have the complete picture. Another thing, another indicator could be that that GUR team providing the service is running at 100% capacity in just running sessions, and they don't have time to do any other type of activity that will evolve into this R&D. Another indicator could be, what are you doing right now, right here, which is attending conferences, knowing what's going on in the industry, listening what other people are doing, what other techniques that you are not doing with your team are out there and seem pretty cool and making an impact or a difference of how you can have information from your users. Reading specialized media, reading papers, catching up with colleagues. So remaining competitive with the rest of the industry. Another indicator is the should we. Should we be doing this? Should we be doing that? It's a moment that the team realizes that there are limits, that those limits should be pushed to create new ways, but they are actually not carried forward, so they don't achieve maturity. So count how many times you say, should we have done that, and that didn't come to full fruition. The last indicator that I want to mention is that we don't know what we don't know, and it's obvious, but the key point of that is that if you don't stop and reflect, that you only will see the things that you recognize. If I mention a word and you don't see it, it's because you don't know about it. So this last point is a red flag to, if you're not dedicating a time to actually start looking forward to other things, maybe you should stop and look for new aspects. So those are the indicators I wanted to share with you today. I wanted to pass again to Paul.
Thanks. By the way, I have no idea what a puppy has to do with you don't know what you don't know, but I
The
didn't.
puppy is looking for things.
Oh,
And it's cute.
yeah. Awesome. Okay. So the EA Sports GUR team. I think, doing an evaluation, we're in case one, pretty much, most of the time. We have a GUR team. They're not really doing a lot of R&D. That's not saying these guys aren't bright. They want to do R&D, but they just don't. They're just not doing it because they don't have the capacity to do it. They don't have the structure to do it. So we call, if you're not familiar with what we do up at EAC, we have a team called Game Ops. That's what we call the GUR team. It's a very focused, skilled group delivering GUR services to the game teams throughout the development life cycle. So they do some things extremely well. They do survey data. They do focus groups. I didn't realize it was a bad word until this morning. Inherent key industry knowledge. These people really understand the game industry. And they actually do Metacritic forecasting, which, again, I didn't realize was a bad word until I had dinner with Bill last night. So they do those things exceptionally well, and they provide a very valuable service to the teams that are being developed, or the games that are being developed up at EAC. The benefits, like getting back to what Veronica was saying about the benefits of a Case 1, it's a very small, focused team. It's very cost-effective, so they charge very little for the work that they do, and they are constantly advancing the existing methods that they have. Year over year, they're getting better at running those surveys, they're getting better at running those focus groups, and they're getting better at the data that they're providing back to the game teams. But the cons, however, and I don't like the word cons because it's so negative. Sure, I don't, whatever. Okay, cons. Can't think that fast on my feet, sorry. Their number one focus is being cost efficient. I know that you talked about that briefly this morning. Being cost efficient, game usability research, being cost efficient in anything in game development is obviously extremely important. However, the very first filter that they put on any new idea is, do you think we'll be able to do this cheaply? They're like, well, if that's the first question you're going to ask, then you'll never get off the launching pad to do research and development, because R&D is not about being cheap first. It's about finding what's the best thing to do and then figuring out how to make it cheap. So unfortunately, that's the very first filter. Development are leading their initiative. So they are actually, and this is why I say they do a little bit of R&D, because game teams come to them and say, you know what, I know you're not doing this now, but I'd like you to try out this new tool that we've seen somewhere else. We'll help you with it. We'll get you the tool, and we'll show you how to use it so you can do it for us. I don't really think that's the way that Game Ops should act. Game Ops should be more proactive in finding out what services they could be adding to the development teams, but it's just the way that it currently is. All of their budget goes towards service delivery. So it is a service department. It's not an R&D department. And again, we're going to talk about this so many times. You don't know what you don't know. They have very little opportunity to step back and take a look at the bigger picture. They have very little time to come to conferences and talk to people about what other companies are doing and so on and so forth. But I've had conversations with them, and it's not that they don't want to. They fully acknowledge that there's opportunities out there. They just don't know how to take advantage of them with the structure that they currently have. So exploring the reasoning for R&D. Okay. So as I was introduced, I'm not originally from game usability research. Worked on a game team as a QA development, embedded QA development director. And we had a portfolio of games, and on one project that we were working on a radically new gameplay engine in a game, in an iterative title that we do, because that's all we tend to do is iterative titles. But that's for another conversation. So it was completely different. And we were getting really interesting information back from Game Ops in that it kept coming back different. So we would have testing done in Vancouver, Tiburon, Ears, wherever. And even within our own studio, each playtest session seemed to come back with different ratings on where the game team thought the gameplay should be. And even within individual people, it seemed to come back differently. It was just a very, very bizarre thing. So having a talk with the franchise or the group DD on the project, we thought, maybe we can implement a new methodology, make the focus group things not working very well. The surveys aren't really asking the questions that we need, and so on and so forth. Maybe there's a new technique or a new methodology that we can do. But we acknowledge that it involves it would be quite a bit more expensive than the way that we were currently collecting data. So we went to the game ops partners and asked them if we could do this. And it was like, boom, no. It's not that they didn't want to, it's just that there's no way that they could support that financially. And I suppose the game team, if they're willing to pay for it, game ops will do anything you want, because it is a service department. But at the same time, they didn't have the capacity, the know-how, or even really the interest, per se, to help us with this particular situation. So what we did was we created our own Think Aloud tool in-house. And funny enough, I was doing this. I didn't really know it was a Think Aloud tool until after we made it, and then I started doing some research on it. I thought, oh, I just made a Think Aloud tool. And we created this really fancy dashboard. This isn't it, but we did make a really fancy dashboard. And we started bringing in our own test subjects and running it. But we did it all within the game team. We did approach the game ops team and said, hey, did you want to have fun with our Think Aloud tool? And they're like, it's too expensive. So the lessons that we sort of got from that is the project was beta when the tool was ready. So it wasn't that the tool wasn't giving us good information. It's just that by the time we actually started running and getting the data back, we were already beta, which was probably already 3 weeks past final anyway. If production is asking for it, or if the dev team is asking for it, they probably needed it yesterday, and that's just the way dev teams work. So if you're not proactively trying to get ahead of your game teams with stuff that they may need, it's going to be too late. You're just being reactionary. Untrained people at the wheel. I was untrained. There's a bunch of producers untrained. It would have been so great if we actually had someone like Veronica working with us at the time who could have led us through this. But if you're letting the development team sort of drive the initiatives in your GUR team, then they might not be the best trained people in that activity. Or maybe they are. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just, you never know. So, and the GUR team structure was just not conducive to experimental research for us. But the bonus is that the production team was really into this this initiative. They thought, wow, this is really cool. And it's great when you get full buy-in from the game teams on what it is that you're trying to do and accomplish. So talking about the evolution now of the team, so we're at a point in the esports, or in the label, that we recognize that we did need to sort of move into a different cases when it came to game usability research. And to come to that sort of conclusion is like, yay, hooray, now what do you do? I mean, awesome. But now the work really sort of has to begin. I'm going to pass it back to Veronica. She's going to talk about the sort of the evolutionary steps that you need to consider if you're going to go down the path of creating an R&D department in your team.
Yeah, I'm going to say exactly that. So we are pinpointing to, if you have that same experience of needs to expand, to do different things, aspect to consider if you're going to do that jump would be the existing team dynamics and their size. So it's more about, do you have enough people? Will you need to, do they have those skills or the kind of training that is required to try something different? Will they understand that? Or will they require to have other type of training? If you are not going to increase the size, would you be willing to allocate one of those persons to the R&D activity? And if you're actually considering to, okay, I'm in case 1, I'm doing GUR, but I need to expand my horizons, would I prefer to have my GUR teams together? Would you prefer to have that satellite team doing the R&D? And there is no right or wrong question. It's assess your own situation and evaluate what would be more beneficial according to your current structure and the politics inside the company. Another part is the R&D budget. So, and this one is going to depend on how the currently billing system works for the company. So it's going to the studio to support that new arm of R&D, or if there are different teams working in different products, are they going to chip in a different way? Is the proportion going to be the same for everyone, or maybe the bigger team has to contribute a little bit more? Or if the billable fee for GUR is going to increase or not. And again, this is going to be quite different depending on the size of the company, how many products are working on, and so on. The other aspect is an optimal timeline. So if there is a time of a lot of activity going on, should be this the right moment to step in and do the R&D, or should we wait a little bit, a couple of months until things cool down, and then come out with a proposal? Because if the game is about to be released within a month, maybe there is no point to come out crazy and try that new method because there won't be time to implement any of the information coming up from that. Another thing is current opportunities. Is there a team yelling out there saying that they need some other type of information? Maybe that's a great opportunity to take advantage of, and then you have a client willing to support that new endeavor and will be of great support for going through that process. And regarding economic validity, well, in tough times, R&D department might be the first out to go because they are not actually producing anything. They are just eating a bunch of money and not giving anything back. So, in fact, one of the comments was, maybe don't name your R&D. Call it something else so you get disguised under another naming, just to be, safe. Those are the 5 aspects that we wanted to bring forward about what should be considered if you're going to make that jump. Might be other ones, but those are part of which one we have to look at when that jump was done at DAC. I think it's going back to you now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, shoot, it's already 10:44. Okay, we got to move along. So falling into GUR, R&D, EDA sports. I say falling into it because we didn't actually seek out looking to create an R&D department per se. It kind of hit us blindside. We got to utilize an external resource that kind of showed us the way, that this is the way we should be going, and that was working with academia. We wanted help with that Think Aloud tool that I talked about earlier, and we thought, we talked to our university liaison person, and I was under the impression that I was going to get a co-op who could sort of make coffee for me and help me do some of the coding. But no, they actually talked to EA, Simon Fraser University and the School of Interactive Arts and Technology, which is where Veronica comes from. And along with her and her supervisor, Maggie, who some of you might know, presented this laundry list of radical R&D activity type stuff they really wanted to try in the corporate sector. So do I talk about it here? So they proposed new research initiatives, and we're talking about the biometrics, the eye tracking, the triangulation of telemetry data, yada, yada, yada. And it was partially funded by the Canadian government. So we actually get the government in Canada will fund research projects as long as academia can work with the private sector, which is pretty awesome. But so it kind of came out of left field, and we're like, well, sure, how could we say no? I think it was going to cost the company about $7,500. And we got about a year and a half of research out of it. That's pretty amazing. Maybe it was a little bit more than 75. It doesn't matter. So there's obviously some very strong pros to working with academia. You're working with people who understand the science. Okay, we weren't research people. We don't have a lot of research people at EA in the fields that we were looking at. So this was definitely a plus for us. They have hardware that we don't have, and we don't have Microsoft dollars. So we have struggling EA dollars? Well, okay. So the, cheap EA dollars. So the, they had access to hardware that there's no way we could have bought ourselves. The funding was shared, again, like I said, between EA, SFU, and MyTax, which is the government program. And it's try before you buy. Hey, if it didn't work out for us, so what? I mean, nobody really knew we were doing it in the first place. A little bit more important to the school, but that's their situation. But there's lessons in working with academia, and to be honest, we could set up an entire session on talking about how private sectors and academia or schools can get together and work and the pros and cons of that. But I didn't want to walk away thinking that, like, I don't want everybody running out and calling their university saying, okay, we have to work together to get an R&D department going. But there are some things you have to be aware of. They were far removed from the development team, which was a bit of a problem. Development wasn't so interested in this experimental, crazy stuff that was going on behind this closed door. The objective alignment, we had different goals between industry and academic research. Academics tend to like to publish papers. We tend to like to be a little bit more secretive and want more, I don't know, we just didn't care about the publishing. The timelines, academics work at a completely different pace than the private sector. For those of you who went to university, they're crazy slow. And the agile focus. We tend to change things on the fly. Like, oh my God, this new game out, let's shift focus over there tomorrow. And academics are like, oh, I don't know. We kind of set up the research to do it this way with this and that and that. And it's like, well, we kind of felt that we got into a rut and we couldn't get out of it. But it was absolutely an amazing experience working with the university. And if it wasn't for that opportunity, I don't think Veronica and I would be standing here today talking about R&D at EA Sports. So we're going to leave the academic side for a second now. We're going to go back to what we've actually done. So the Advanced Usability Lab, as you notice, as Veronica mentioned, there's no R&D in our title. It was actually the advice of our VP of Central Operations to say, don't call yourselves an R&D department, because that's the first department they're going to axe when the economy goes south again. So, or continues to go south, I don't know, depending where you are. So we did create a proposal without the R&D that would speak directly to the business stakeholders of the studio. And we wanted to increase EA Sports' competitive advantage, obviously, drive innovation internally and externally. People like working at places where they do R&D, especially if you have that sort of background where you want to uncover new things. We want to demonstrate to our customers that we are putting them at a higher priority. As it is with anybody here working in a game company, your studio saying or your company saying customers are number one, highest priority, so on and so forth. Well, let's walk the walk kind of thing, or talk the talk, not walk the walk. Evangelize UX across all facets of the business. So this is an opportunity for an R&D department, not just to work with the GUR team, but work with all the game teams, the central teams, the teams down in Tiburon, so on and so forth, and push the practice of usability and user experience. And then, of course, getting back to the pursuit of uncovering what we don't know. That in itself, I think, is worthy of setting up an R&D department, because until you sit down and reflect, you just don't know what you don't know. And they agreed. I was a little bit shocked, actually, and because this would have been back in October or November, so the economy was still a bit shaky. And they said, yeah, sure, let's do it. I thought, awesome. Who are you going to get to do it? And they said, you. And I thought, damn it, I didn't really sign up for that. So the proposal is more than just talking to the stakeholders of the company. It's also putting together a bigger proposal. And these are just a handful of things before we sort of wrap this up on things to consider if you really are going to be serious about putting together an R&D proposal. Keep it small. Nobody wants to hear about an R&D proposal that's going to cost $10 million, but maybe $200,000 is, I think that's what we got for the first year. It's 2 people, and that's it. Finding enablers is paramount. There's so many people, and I bet you there's people that you're working with who think that you should be doing R&D and game usability research. Why wouldn't you do it? There's a lot of people who are just coming out of university that your studio is hiring who took a course in human behavior, and they're like, wow, we're not doing this, we should be doing this. So if you get their support, they start going into these boardrooms and they start having their own meetings with the VP of operations or the people who will write your checks, and they're saying, I can't believe you guys aren't doing research. If anybody, you should really do it. So that was very beneficial to us. Timing your proposal, waiting until you're ready. So don't go in and just say, hey, I just came back from a GUR summit and somebody said we should do R&D, so I think we should do it. No, it's actually, maybe you should do a little bit of R&D work to have like a track record. We had the benefit of having that track record with the university that showed that R&D was actually proving to be having like tangible returns. But do research on what other companies are doing and put together their business cases in front of your stakeholders. Align expectations, don't make aggressive commitments. Don't say you're going to radically change the world, because that's not what R&D is about. R&D is about the freedom to explore new ideas, be prepared to fail. So we had to set up our FY12 strategic objectives, and we said, okay, you know what, this year we're going to look at 3 new ideas, and only one of them is going to be piloted before March. Well, that's not even implemented, that's just piloted. So we haven't set ourselves up to fail per se, unless of course we can't figure out 3 things to do and can't pilot something by March, but hopefully we can. We didn't come in and say, we want to implement 10 new ideas before the end of the fiscal year, because that's just not possible. I guess I already just talked about that, over-promising onto deliverables. The service department pitfall. So if you want to be an R&D group, be an R&D group. If you want to be a service team, be a service team. But understand the dynamic between the two. It's hard to be an R&D team while delivering a service. And as soon as you start to deliver service, so if you are going down the path of R&D and you do uncover a new methodology and you do pilot it, you do implement it, be prepared to hand that off to somebody else who will then continue that service. If you think you're going to continue that service, well, then you're no longer an R&D team, which is fine, and that might be what you want to do. I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything. But so sort of to wrap this up in our conclusion, because we're 2 minutes over already, doing game usability research does not necessarily imply research advancement. Decide if that's what you need to do in your company. Do we need to take where we are now and get to the next level, get to the next step, or are you happy with what you're doing now? Understand the difference between the two. Just because GUR has the word research in it doesn't mean you're actually doing research. What works well for one organization might be ideal for another. Which case scenarios are you and where should you be at? That's something I just discussed. R&D enable personal and organizational growth. So you can use R&D as that opportunity to elevate a program or a activity that you're doing. It's an opportunity to bring in new people with new skill sets, new ideas, taking you in ultimately new directions. I'll just quickly say that when we were doing the work with Simon Fraser, we were collecting this data on biometrics and eye tracking and so on and so forth, we uncovered something that sales and marketing was way more interested in than the game team. And we had no idea that that research would take us in that direction. Be prepared to go into all these different areas and directions and grow with that and sort of accept that, because that's the beauty of having an R&D group. And then how to make it happen. Hopefully you took out of the presentation a little bit on sort of the opportunities that we were faced with and that proposal process on getting a studio to sort of see the value in R&D as you do. I think that's it. That would be a end slide kind of picture, wouldn't it? Yeah, okay. So, anybody have any questions on that for Veronica? Shoot.
I know I'm not supposed to be the radio control for another 20 minutes. My experience has been very different from yours, where you're saying that it really helps to have the R&D arms separate from the service arm?
Yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, the pitfalls that Veronica has actually talked about, the risks to having a separate R&D, you lose the synergy between R&D and your current GUR team. We're kind of seeing that a little bit. So we have to, that's something that we need to take back to our studio and fix. So it's not the best way to go per se, but we recognize that the current GUR team is running at that 100% capacity service. And it's a service team. They've set themselves up as a service team. We didn't think that initially we could put an R&D group in there without them being consumed by their service mentality, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Is that?
My experience, like the best sort of new techniques have come out of, okay, we're making a game that has a complex multiplayer. Let's do some research on better multiplayer testing and have it tied into the service that's being delivered.
Yeah. I think we had that in a slide at one point that we might have axed it for whatever reason. If you are willing to recognize that R&D group is being done within your GUR team and you budget for it, that's fine too. I mean, but it's how you're going to run your capacity. Do you want to run the capacity of the team at 80% service and 20% R&D? You do run the risk, though, that they're going to slide into that service, or suddenly you have all these guys working in R&D and nobody's actually, keeping the lights on with the service of the game teams.
I will add to that it has to be a lot with the idiosyncrasy of the company. So people from Microsoft and you being also coming from that most of you are that has been the case at EA Sports. It's different. So the people who have been doing that and coming from a completely different background, a completely different skill set, and that didn't click. So maybe I think that the way of trying to push those boundaries about that should have been done, in our case, it worked better to create a separated group. And as he was saying, that we recognize that maybe we are not clicking that well with the current team and having that synergy of passing back and forth. And that's a risk that we actually having right now and we want to fix. So maybe from your case, it was, of course it was coming with that. But as it happened here at DAC, or might happen in another company, it has to be maybe forced in another way, and to not disturb the current work team that, it was better to start this activity with a separated group.
Nothing else. Awesome. Okay, I guess that's it. If anybody wants to come and talk to us after the session, we're here. All right, thanks.